So today, we're going to talk about roses. No, we're going to talk about rising above all limitations and how in community, it is only in being seen that we can truly see what it means to be here in community together, what it means to be seen, what it means to see each other. So Charles Fillmore says, imagination gives us the ability to project ourselves through time and space and rise above all limitations. So if you don't know, Charles Fillmore is the co-founder of Unity, which is what we are here. And one of the things we talk about, whether it's necessarily obvious or not, is that what we see out in front of us, what we're taught growing up, is not always nearly as real as they make it seem. Would have been nice to know a little bit earlier. But the world is absolutely not what it seems, and we know that here, and we teach that here. We talk about that on a weekly basis in one form or another, that the world, the truth of our reality, is not what is necessarily in front of us. Did you know that 99% of what makes up physical matter is actually empty space? Kind of crazy when you really think about it. So the ratio of element to element, if you were to expand that to larger proportions, it's equivalent to the same amount of space as there is between planets in our solar system. That's how much space there is in between the smallest pieces that make up everything that's real. So only 1% of what I'm standing on right now is actually true matter. And to make that even more crazy, that 1% is only there when something witnesses it, and as soon as it's witnessed, it's gone. Like actually gone, not like moved somewhere else. Like we don't know and can't tell where that electron goes after it's witnessed. And it's like totally mind-blowing. When you really think about, we so truly believe in what we see, yet it's fooling us all the time. That not only has spirituality tried to teach us this for thousands of years, but quantum physics is now proving it through experimentation, the scientific method, the whole thing. They're saying, we don't actually know. We really don't know. When you can go and watch electrons circle around within these particles, we can see it only once it happened already. Think about that for a second. You can see it only when it's happened already. So even when you see it, it's past. And then it kind of goes back into the nothingness that it came from. It needs an observer in order for it to actually show up here, which is totally crazy. So what is real? What is real? I think this is real. I'm standing on it. It feels real. I feel real. And yet everything in here, it operates that same way. It needs an outside observer, something that for a really long time we've called God. Science likes to say it needs an observer, right? It needs God. God had to happen first, which we know, right? We know here. Now we can know on paper. There has to be a God to observe in order to create. So God is literally recreating all of reality in every moment. And guess what? You are the observer. So when we say that we create as God creates, we're literally reenacting that in every moment. We become the observer. We become the one who sees these electrons momentarily all over the place. And we become real. We become the experience. God needs us here as part of God, within God, as and of God, to have this experience, to have this real, tangible expression of the all that there is, right? And the interesting part about this, if you've ever seen an Escher photo before, reality is not what it seems. To the point that we could say we've kind of been lied to. Like, I grew up and all this was real? Like you should believe what you see. It's not real unless you can prove it kind of thing. And all of that does have its place, and I think to a certain extent that's true. And yet, we're not really operating in that when it really comes down to it. When we really come down to looking inward, we don't operate based on what we see. Yet we're taught to operate based on what we see. So we're told that what you see you should believe. And yet, we step in here, we come to this place, into this community, and go, wait a minute, I'm not sure that that's totally true. I'm not sure that we can totally believe everything that we see. And one of the reasons this happens is because when we are growing up, I believe, we are born with a completely blank slate. And whether we come with preconceived purposes and things like that, we can have a discussion on another day. But in terms of our growth, we come with no history, we come with no patterning other than what is already here in existence. There's a collective idea, a collective consciousness that already exists, but personally, we come with no ego, right? We don't have any patterns yet. We don't have anything to tell us yet how things are supposed to be. So we come with this blank slate that we're always met with a fork in the road in every moment. So what happens is, in every single moment since the moment we were born, we are met with two choices. And that is, an experience happens, and we can either react to it or not react to it in every single moment. Now, if you're an infant and you're hungry, you don't necessarily know that you have that choice. You just know there's a feeling, I cry, that feeling goes away. Something happens and that feeling goes away. And this experience becomes a pattern so that every time that infant is hungry, it cries, the parents show up with a bottle, it gets fed, and it stops crying. Now, sometimes there are moments where, as an infant, we have an experience where we don't have words yet, we don't have language as an infant, so we don't really know what this feeling is, and we cry. Well, since we don't have words, our parents don't know yet either what this infant wants or needs. And so this experience now turns into, I cry and this thing doesn't go away. It doesn't work this time. We have to develop coping mechanisms. And this pattern has been around forever. Since human history has begun, we have this part of our brain that we refer to as the reptilian brain. It's the part with the fight or flight, and it's there to protect us. Its whole job is to protect us. And the crazy part about this is, when it developed, we were running from saber-toothed tigers and woolly mammoths. So the threat was real. That part of the brain has actually not evolved since then. So that part of our brain, when we develop these patterns, still thinks we're running from saber-toothed tigers and woolly mammoths. So anytime we have a need that is not met as a child, that part of the brain kicks on and we go, wait a minute, and we get kicked into fight or flight mode. So what happens is, this event as a child lands on us somewhere, and we carry it with us. These are our coping mechanisms, and we carry this with us throughout our entire life. So it's not a bad thing, right? This is developing our ego. Our ego tends to get a really bad rap, especially in New Thought and spiritual communities, that we think we're here to transcend our ego and get rid of the ego. And while there is value to that concept, I think our ego really gets overlooked in a lot of ways, because as a child, the ego serves a certain function where it really is protecting us. And that's amazing. That's great. We need that. However, we don't have the experience of moving beyond that in our current civilization. Most other cultures have some sort of rite of passage that happens 14, 15, 16 years old, and you're dragged out of your bed in the middle of the night into the woods, blindfolded, and some crazy, what sounds to us terrifying experience. And what happens is, it's part of this ceremony in what we would consider an uncivilized life, I guess. where these teenagers are brought through this experience that is actually shedding these old beliefs, because what happens is, as a child, we develop fears of the dark, fears of the unknown, fear of things that are outside of us. We don't have that experience. They shed those old ego patterns. They make it through that night and go, wow, I made it. I'm still alive. This is awesome. I don't have to be afraid of the dark anymore. Not having that, we grow up into full adults having these same patterns. So we grow up here with crazy fear and belief in evil and belief that what's outside of us is real, because as a child we don't necessarily have the mental capacity to understand that the things in front of us, while we feel them and sense them and can touch them, they're not as real as we'd like them to be. So Charles Fillmore also said that God is good, God is all. Therefore, I refuse to believe in the reality of evil in any of its forms. Notice he says in any of its forms. Right? We think we are taught often, whether it's intentionally or not, whether it's just through our own habits and patternings, our own egoic patternings, that this evil is real. And if we were to have some experience where we can shed that ego and step outside and realize, oh, this belief is simply something that I developed as a child to cope with whatever was in front of me that I didn't like, that didn't work, right? We're always given these two choices between reacting to this event or not reacting to this event. And when we react to it, it's because that reptilian part of the brain thinks it needs to protect us, thinks that we need this coping mechanism in order to escape from whatever this thing is. Now, as an adult, I think we know we probably don't need to be afraid of the dark. Yet, there's real things that we think exist in the dark that we tend to be afraid of. So, as adults, we could benefit from having had this experience of shedding these old egoic things, right? We are not meant as humans to continue on having these childhood coping mechanisms, yet most of us, probably all of us, have not had an experience where we have been able to shed the majority of those coping mechanisms, and they become subconscious. They become unconscious to us. They're mechanisms that we have that are kind of running the show, even though we don't realize it behind the scenes. There's this belief that goes, you should be afraid of that. That fear is real. Don't trust them, right? It's all of these negative, evil things. But wait a minute. God is good all the time. How can God be good over here and we have evil over here? If God is everywhere and everything and has created everything out of itself, how do we have evil over here and God over here? Now all of a sudden we have separation. So any belief in separation or any belief in evil or fear or lack of trust is separation. So it is our job as adults to make choices that move us forward. And I said before that the ego tends to get a bad rap. Well, really, the ego has evolved. We don't think necessarily that it has. We don't tend to think of it that way, but the ego has evolved, and it has actually evolved into this new iteration of itself, a new iteration of us, where it becomes the buffers on every side of us to go, you're going the wrong way, right? We run into these things and we go, oh my God, that's scary, and we run this way. And then something else over here happens, and then we go, oh, that's scary, I'm running over here now, because there's constantly these bumpers back and forth. Well, if we kind of decide where those bumpers are, well, they're all pointing in one direction. We're trying to go that way and that way, when really Spirit through us, through our ego, because if everything is God, including ourselves, and it is in everything we are, including our thoughts, our beliefs, and our emotions, our ego then is also God. We are not here to transcend the ego, we're here to listen to it. Why else would we have it? And it is trying to direct us in a specific direction that says, here's your growth, here is your good, Here is what you're looking for. The thing you're looking for is looking for you, and it's over there. Not over there, and not over there. It's that way. So when we realize that, now all of a sudden we get to make new choices. We get to decide, yeah, that way. That's the way. I want to go that way. So then when we come over here and this thing starts coming up, we can go, oh. It's not that I'm supposed to be afraid of this thing over here. It's that this is not what's going to work for me. Or, oh, this is that thing. I need to step through this in order to move forward, in order to grow spiritually, in order to get closer to that which I am, in order to obtain what I'm meant to have, in order to obtain what is my good here, or to fulfill my purpose, or whatever it is. These become our bumpers. They become our buffers to redirect us back in the right direction. A favorite quote of mine is from a movie you may or may not have seen. It's from The Lion King, and you have to remember who you are. And that is literally what our ego is trying to do with us in every moment. You have to remember who you are. Because you are not that thing that you're afraid of. You're not that thing that is trying to block you. You're not that thing that we've been running away from. We are that thing that's right in front of us. And a lot of times, because we have not had this experience to shed these coping mechanisms that don't serve us anymore, we think that thing that's right in front of us is too good to be true, or we think the other shoe is going to drop, or we think that it's actually somebody else's, and we start going the wrong way. In truth, it's right in front of us the whole time. It really is. It is ours to have. It is ours for the taking. We're meant to. Seriously, like it is given to us in the act of co-creating. We have literally created everything that's in front of us. So the flip side to all this is the things that we've been running away from, the things we are afraid of, are actually the things that we've created through all of this. We've created it and recreated it our whole lives. Because our mind, which we tend to think is separate from God, is actually tapped into this one and only mind that there is. There's only one mind. Think about that. If the thoughts you're having aren't really your thoughts, because there's no mind of yours to have them, that there's only one mind, and we're all having these thoughts as part of this one mind. That the mind of God is saying, here, think these things. It's why inventions tend to happen 2 and 3 places in the world at the same time. Right? But it is this mind, this co-creative process that says, here, have this thing in front of you, and we go, I don't know, maybe. I don't think so. I'm going to keep going this way for a little bit and see what happens. And it tends really not to work out so well. So our ego is, in fact, tending to push us forward. And it's going to keep pushing us forward past what's comfortable, past the things that we have had on a normal basis, past the things that have worked for us. The ego, where we think it's out to get us, right? I think that's taught a lot in communities such as this, that the ego is this thing that it's trying to drive you away from your good, it's trying to drive you away from your God. And I know that a lot of what I'm saying probably sounds like sacrilegious or something to those groups. I think it's the flip side of the same coin, that in a lot of ways, if we live an ego-driven life, and it's all about the cars and the money and the people and who do you know and where do you live and all that kind of stuff, there's a tendency that can lead to greed, and in a way, that tendency is bringing us away from our good. But if you really stop and look at what is behind those tendencies, the ego is not saying to go follow those things. The ego is saying, here's this situation again. Let's try it again. Here's another shot. Are you going to step through it this time? Or are we going to turn around again? And when we look at it and go, oh, I can make a different choice, which is probably why most of us are here. We had a point in our lives where we thought, hey, you know what? I can make a different choice. I don't have to think that same thing again. I can move in a different direction. We always have 2 choices in every moment. You can react to it or not. And when we react differently or choose to move through this thing that seemed like a block, we get a different experience. And that is when you get to move beyond what has held you up the whole time. There's another quote from The Lion King that I really like. And it says, "Oh yes, the past can hurt. But the way I see it, you can either run from it or learn from it." And I don't know if you remember this part in the movie, but Rafiki just smacks Simba in the back of the head with a big stick. And he goes, "Ow." He goes, "Yeah, but it's in the past. Don't worry about it." But this is true. It really is true. As much as it's a Disney movie, there's a lot of truth in this, that you can either run from it or learn from it. And I think we are taught to run from it. So much of what we see, so much of what we are told growing up and then reiterated again and again and again throughout our lives are these reoccurring patterns, and we think that's super uncomfortable. I'm not going to do that again. And we run from it, but what happens is we kind of suppress that experience, and we don't really work through it. We don't really get to learn from it. We don't really get to grow out into what is the next iteration, the next best thing of ourselves. So in ignoring what was, we're not learning from it. We're going to repeat it again and again. Hence the evolution of the spiritual 2x4. I don't know if you're familiar. Those of you who are laughing are. God has a tendency of having this 2x4 and smacks you upside the back of the head a little bit when we need it. And it says, stop doing the same thing over and over. Because we just keep repeating that same thing. So, I told you we were going to talk about community, and so far we haven't. But all of that is super important because that's the basis of community. We are actually wired to search for community. We are wired. We are hardwired. When we are born, we are hardwired to search for community. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. Thousands of years ago, it was for safety and protection. That may be the case nowadays. But as human consciousness evolves, and as we evolve, our needs have changed. So if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, not to get totally psychological on you today, the bottom two levels, we got that. We're there, right? We're born, most of us were born with those two needs those two needs met. There are some cases where that's not true, right? And we kind of need to readdress those. However, for the majority of people living in the United States, these two needs are met 90% of the time. So our ego, which psychologically, spiritually, and historically developed at this very bottom level of this triangle, still thinks we're there. And this is where it tends to get a bad rap, because it has a tendency of repeating patterns that keep us in this level, that keep us in this low level of needs. We have needs far beyond this, so we always feel like we're not having our needs met, that we're not fulfilled. Well, these top three needs can only be met in community. We are not fulfilled as spiritual beings if we are not in spiritual community. And I know you know this because you're here. And whether you know it openly or not, I don't know. But you know this at some place within your being. You know that there is a reason we keep coming week after week. It's not because we're supposed to. It's not because we believe in guilt. It's not because you're going to go to hell if you don't come. We don't have that here, right? A lot of us used to have that and thought, wow, I really need to go there because I'm supposed to. But here, we get to evolve beyond that guilt, evolve beyond whatever that was about, and realize that we are all looking for love and belonging. Well, there needs to be a group of people to belong to if you're going to belong, right? We're all looking to fulfill our level of esteem. We're all looking to feel good about ourselves. Again, we need each other in order to feel good about ourselves. And we're all looking for self-actualization, which means we're looking to fulfill our essence, our deepest purpose, right? We are all looking for a place where we can have an importance, an impact, where we can have a place to create with each other, right? So when we come together in community, what happens is we're each trying to fulfill these things, but we haven't dealt with these things in the first two levels yet. We haven't looked at these things that our egos still, we're still trying to go over there and over there. And these top three layers are trying to point us this way. They're trying to pull us this way, and the ego is trying to push us this way, and we're stuck going this way, back and forth, right? So, the whole entire point of right now, of this moment, of this day, and what I'm saying is, when we come together in community, there's a lot of this that happens. And that's intentional. And it's super uncomfortable a lot of the time. To be really real about it, this gets really uncomfortable. Because I show up, I want my needs met. And you show up, you want your needs met, and you want your needs, and you want your needs. But guess what? I have an ego, you have an ego, we all have an ego, but we as a community also have this same patterning. This building, these grounds, this congregation has built its own patterning that is also pushing us towards our greatest good, pushing us towards our next iteration of ourselves as a community. So it is absolutely intentional that when we show up and we have this rub, the same thing is happening for us as a group that happens for us individually. And it's trying to push us past what is comfortable so that we can expand, so that we can grow, so that we can be the way showers for whoever's coming next. Because there's a couple hundred people here right now. Within a couple seconds, you can go online and find out that there are close to 10,000 people within a 15-mile radius of this building that already believe what we believe and have no idea that we're here. 10,000 people. Now, we're not going to reach all 10,000 of those people. But it's up to us to do this work. It's up to us to when we show up here, for us to do our own work, to be on our own journey for our own spiritual growth, to realize our own true essence of who we are, so that we can take that with us everywhere we go. So that when we go out these doors on a Sunday, that we become this person that takes this idea with us 7 days of the week, right? This is not a Sunday-only church. This is a 24/7 gig. I don't know if you knew that, but it's a little too late now. But I invite you to pay attention when we are in community to how we show up. I'm responsible for me. Eileen is responsible for Eileen. We're each responsible for ourselves, for how we show up in community, because guess what? We become each other's mirrors. So Eileen is going to show to me all of the things that I need the little push forward on. And she knows it now. But that's going to be true for each of us, that we all get to be the mirrors. So what I'm not liking that I see in Eileen, which we don't even need to get into, no. Kidding. What I'm seeing is what I don't like about me. It's not necessarily that there are those things about me to not like. It's that there are things in my past that I haven't looked at yet that are saying, hey, that way. And I'm going, I don't know, right? So we become the mirrors for each other. Community is our mirror. We are at a point in history where our consciousness has evolved beyond where we were before, beyond what has worked before. We're to a place where we need community in order to evolve further, in order to continue growing, in order to not get stuck in the muck and the nonsense that we all see going on outside, right? All of those questions last week, oh my gosh. We all want to know the same thing. How do I show up differently? How do I show up so I don't get this stuff stuck on me? How do I show up so that when I go to Thanksgiving and the politics conversation comes up, we don't start flinging food at each other? this is it. We come here in community and see, oh, where are the things that are pointing me in a different direction I haven't been paying attention to? So, your charge moving forward is to allow this church to be your playground, to allow this space when we come together to be a safe place that we all get to co-create this spiritual growth, to be a place where it is safe to show up with whatever we have and know that when you come to me, Eileen, it's not about me. When I come to you, it's not about you. And we get to reflect to each other, oh, right, we're trying to move that way. So we are all going to show up. We're going to do this. We're going to bump heads. We're going to clash intentionally. You're not doing it on purpose, but the thing that's driving all of us is, right? That we have to have the faith and trust that there's something behind all of us, moving us forward. And moving forward sometimes looks like the unpleasant, uncomfortable thing that we need to step through and step past. And really, I'm grateful for that, because without it, we would just be pacing back and forth in the mud. Right? I mean, we really wouldn't be doing a whole lot of anything. So I ask that when you do come, that you watch your reactions in community. What is coming up? What am I reacting to? Why am I thinking that about this person or this way or this decision? That we take a look to see what we're seeing in others, to know that it's an invitation to look inward and go, why am I seeing that? Because I'm the one seeing it. It's through my frame of reference that I'm seeing this thing in this other person. Why is that so? Why do I see that? What am I being called to move towards or through? Be willing. Be willing to learn from your reactions without blame, shame, or guilt. Because honestly, most of the time, when our ego does that thing and we try and move back and forth, we're trying to avoid blame, shame, guilt, right? We want to maintain our dignity. Well, guess what? This is a place where you can do that. This is a place where we have a community of people where we are willing to show up and let each other have that space where we can be honest about what's going on and not have to be concerned with blame or shame or guilt. We get to have our dignity. Each one of you, everyone, gets to have their dignity and still show up, because we know there's a higher truth. We know that there is this spiritual growth moving behind all of this. So when we have the willingness, we have growth in our community. When we have the willingness to show up with what's real, that's when we get to move beyond what's always been. That's when we get to move towards what is happening. So, if we look in the Bible, it even says the same thing. 1 Corinthians, for now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I have been fully known. So truly, it is only in community that we can see by being seen. It is only in knowing that we can truly know. So if the prayer chaplains would stand with me, let's close this in prayer. To know that there is this one power behind everything that knows, this one power behind everything that sees, that moves each and every one of us to be seen and to know in the way that it sees and knows. Because there is no separation between what God sees and what God knows to what we see and what we know. Because the mind that is behind the seeing and the knowing is also our mind. It allows us to move forward, move beyond, to move through that which we think has stood in our way in the past. And truly, this one mind is drawing us towards our own evolution, knowing that there is a constant evolution of mind, of consciousness that is always growing and moving forward that is giving us the opportunity to do the same thing, that as the oneness that we are, every single one of us, that we are all one with this same idea. We are constantly being given the opportunity to move forward, to step through our own limitations, our own boundaries, to see what is meant to be seen, to know what is meant to be known through each one of us, to truly see the divine essence that is within all of us. To know and to see the God in everything. To know and to see that there is no judgment to be made. There is no judgment to be had. There's no shame, guilt, or blame to be had or made or felt or carried anywhere, that it is simply the next step in our spiritual growth and our spiritual evolution, that we are here to know God as God, to know ourselves as God, to know each other as God. That it is a calling from deep within ourselves, that the essence of who we truly are is really what is behind that thing that we call ego, that is constantly pushing us towards our greatest good, constantly inspiring us and encouraging us to move forward, to heal whatever needs to be healed, to look at whatever needs to be looked at, so that we can live in a way that all of our needs are met. We are spiritually fulfilled beings in this community, with a willingness to rise up and above everything that seems to be true, and stand in a knowingness of everything that really is true, the truth of the reality of who we are and how we have come to be. That it is the experience of life here on this plane where we come to know God through these experiences, come to know God through the interactions, through the day-to-day moments. It is the things that we learn here in community that we are able to take out with ourselves on the daily basis as we interact with everyone else. That for every single person I meet, there are thousands of others that are impacted. That in the hundreds of people that I don't even interact with on a daily basis passing by, that there is an essence that comes with each one of us in every one of those interactions, driving by someone on the street, getting to work, walking past someone on the sidewalk, that every one of these people are impacted by the community that we have here, because our essence continues to grow and expand. Millions of people on a daily basis are impacted by the community that we have here, in the growth that we are willing to step into and own as our own. And I am grateful to be a part of this, grateful to witness this through each one of you, grateful to know that there is a power bigger than every one of us that is behind everything that we do, that is constantly encouraging us to create more good for ourselves, more good for the collective whole, and a constant growth and evolution that is beyond anything that we can possibly imagine. And in this gratitude, I simply let this word be. I let it be so, knowing it is our truth, knowing it is done, and so it is. Amen.